say that bourbon is big business in Kentucky would be an understatement. We now know the numbers after the Kentucky Distillers Association released a study that finds Kentucky bourbon is on the verge of what many believe will be an economic golden age. Consider that distilling now contributes $3 billion in gross state product to Kentucky's economy. That's up 67% in just 2 years. And more than 15,000 people owe their paychecks now to the bourbon industry. That's nearly double the number who could say that a couple of years ago. As other sectors of Kentucky's economy have struggled, the money keeps rolling in for bourbon. Joining us this morning is Gregory. He's president of the Kentucky Distillers Association. Appreciate you coming in.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
When you went about to do this study, did you have any idea that those findings would be that strong?
No idea. We do this every couple of years to kind of update not only ourselves and benchmark, but to use it as a tool, speaking with elected officials and the public on how bourbon is doing. And when they first came back, we told the University of Louisville, these can't be right. You know, it's really bigger than we ever imagined. So we had them triple check everything, and after they calmed us down and assured us everything was correct, we asked about 50 more questions, because these really are big numbers. I mean, our jaws dropped.
What stands out most to you when you look at them?
I think jobs, really. You know, we knew that we were a job creator, and especially from a spinoff standpoint. I mean, we've got, 3,000 or 4,000 direct jobs at the distilleries. But when you think of job spinoff companies or industries in Kentucky, you think automobiles, UPS, horses, coal, things like that. And I think that's been the most surprising thing, that about 10,000, 11,000 other people owe their paychecks to the bourbon industry.
When you looked at those initial numbers and you got those encouraging responses, what else was it that you wanted to know?
Well, this year for the first time, we actually looked at grains and the agriculture sector. We've never really done a study on that before. We wanted to see how much corn that the industry is buying and where we can improve upon that. So it showed that we're buying about 40% of Kentucky grains right now. And, I think we can get up to about 80%, hopefully. And that's something that we're going to be working with the Governor's Office of Agricultural Policy and the Kentucky Corn Growers Association to try to raise those numbers. And the other thing is we want to know how is Kentucky competing nationally and internationally in attracting especially the new generation of distilleries. And it shows that, unfortunately, with all the great news, we are falling a little bit behind on craft distilling. Other states have more craft distillers than we do. In fact, we rank about 8th. And so that's something that we're going to be working with the Cabinet for Economic Development and even our own distilleries on trying to attract that next generation to Kentucky.
And for people who may not exactly understand how that's all laid out, craft obviously means you're talking about those micro distillers,
right.
The smaller, often family-owned operations, and your association attempts to represent them as well as the bigger companies, right?
We do. Yeah, and it's something that that was a trend, just like craft brewing, I think, kind of started on the West Coast and has made its way east over the past few years. And in 2010, our board actually revised its bylaws to allow craft distillers to join and quite frankly, welcome them with open arms. So we now have almost 3 times as many craft distillers as we have what we call heritage distillers, and that's the big guys like the Brown-Formans and the Heaven Hills and the Jim Beams. But they brought, a great, young, refreshing voice to our industry, and sometimes I think they look at things a lot differently than we do because we've been, around for 200 years. So it's a great symbiotic relationship where we help them. It's kind of, we can help mentor them, and they bring this new small business view to us that we may oftentimes overlook.
What do you tell people who say, wait, now what do you mean they're making bourbon in other places? Can't that only be done in Kentucky? What are the rules on that?
We wish. Yeah. We'd love to have that change. Bourbon can actually be made anywhere in the United States. In 1964, Congress adopted a resolution that claimed that bourbon is an indigenous product of the U.S., so it can only be made in the U.S. No other country can make a product and call it a bourbon. We just make 95% of the world's bourbon here in Kentucky, and the governor likes to say that the other 5% is counterfeit. Don't drink that. But it has to be made from a series of what we call standards of identities. These are strict federal regulations on what you can make and call bourbon. So it has to be 51% corn at least, with other secondary grains like malted barley, wheat, and rye. It's got to be aged in a brand new charred oak barrel, so it can never be reused, and that really sets us apart from other whiskeys like Scotch and Canadian whiskey and things like that reuse our barrels. It's got to be entered the barrel at no more than 125 proof and bottled at no less than 80 proof. And it's got to be aged at least 2 years to be called straight bourbon whiskey. If it's aged less than 4 years, the age has to be on the bottle. So there are a lot more technical things that kind of go in that, but those are the basic tenets of bourbon.
But you can use the term Kentucky bourbon, and that.
Oh, yeah.
And in other words, that couldn't be made somewhere else.
No. Yes, we'll probably come after you if you try to make it somewhere else.
You know, how important is it to bourbon enthusiasts, whether they're consumers or people who enjoy going around to the tour the distilleries and that kind of thing, to be a part of this rich history that, as you say, has been a part of Kentucky history?
It is. It's something. I'm born and raised Kentuckian, and it's kind of our birthright here. That bourbon has been around for 200 years. Man, we take great pride in that. We get our name from Bourbon County, just a few miles away in Paris, where it was introduced for the first time, sent down to our ports in Louisiana and on the Mississippi River, stamped. The barrels were stamped Old Bourbon County, and that's how really the name came to be. But I don't think until the past few years that we've done a really good job as an industry in telling our story. And I think that's something that this press conference we had this week with the governor and Senate leadership and House leadership really helped us prove that bourbon is a signature industry, that we aren't just a drink anymore. It's part of our culture and heritage. And it's an economic driver that's providing jobs and investment. While the state's been in a little bit of an economic recession, just like the rest of the world the past few years, it's really been a cushion to help us kind of survive that blow.
Well, as we said, it's one of the sectors where we've had to, it's been a terrible economic downturn, but it has been nothing but the green light for the last several years for the bourbon industry. What is driving that demand?
Well, two or three things. First of all, the global growth, I think, is really helping us achieve success. We're opening up new markets in India, China, Russia, and with the passage of a lot of new free trade agreements that are putting bourbon on a level playing field with taxes and tariffs, where Scotch has traditionally enjoyed an advantage of us over there, that's really helped us enter new markets. So we're producing more bourbon than ever before. A lot of that's to quench the growing global thirst for Kentucky bourbon. Second, I think there's been a renaissance in the cocktail culture. It's kind of the Mad Men effect. People see Don Draper drinking an old fashioned on TV, and that's what they want to go to their bars and get. So the sidecars and the Manhattans and the old fashioned and the juleps, those are very much in vogue again, and those are very traditional, classic bourbon cocktails. And then I think the third part of it is really the good old Kentucky entrepreneurial spirit. Our distilleries are producing some of the finest whiskeys ever. The new single barrel and small batch bourbons are being hailed around the world as some of the best American whiskey ever to come out, and they're great in cocktails, and they're great just to even sit around and sip on. So, kind of a three-legged stool.
What countries around the world seem to have the greatest desire for Kentucky bourbon?
European countries, the United Kingdom, and Asia, obviously. Japan, when the rest of the world kind of turned off bourbon in the 70s and 80s in favor of neutral spirits, Japan really helped keep us afloat. They never left us, and so I think that's been they've been a great help in keeping us viable. But then Australia, you may not think about that, but they love their bourbon in Australia, and they love to mix it with Coke and other things. So we send a lot of bourbon down under.
Do these companies market directly in those countries, or is it?
Sure.
And does the Kentucky Distillers Association speak as one voice in those places?
Well, we leave international marketing mainly up to our members. Most of our distilleries have worldwide headquarters in Asia. They've got them in Europe. They've got them, they're putting them in India and places like that. So it's good for them to have feet on the ground over there, but we tap into them whenever we need to. And when the governor goes on trade missions and things, it's been a good help to him, and it's been a great help to us that he can go over there and have Kentucky products available to show and showcase. How
curious are people in other countries and other places about knowing about this place where Kentucky bourbon is made?
You wouldn't believe it. The master distillers are rock stars, and they've become kind of the face of our industry, the face of the brands. And these are living legends like Jimmy Russell from Wild Turkey, who's in his 60th year, and Parker Beam, Jim Rutledge, Chris Morris, Freddie No. Just go on. And it's fun to go over there and watch them be surrounded for autographs, just like a rock star or a sports figure. Because people, I think, not only in America but around the world are thirsty for authenticity. And you can't get anything more authentic than good old Kentucky bourbon.
What do they think about having toiled in relative anonymity for most of their lives, and now all of a sudden, you know, as you say, they're treated like a member of the band Kiss?
Right. You know, actually, I think they love it because you're right. I mean, you know, there for about 20 years or so, bourbon was falling on hard times, and they all stuck through and have been making, again, some of the world's greatest products. And it's fun for us to see, especially the old guard, our elder statesmen who have been with us now for 50, 60 years, to finally people are enjoying the fruits of their labor and their hard work. So I think, you know, I think they're absolutely loving it. Jimmy Russell especially cracks me up. He'll be 80 here in a few weeks. And, you know, I've been with him on several trips to Washington. And to see, you know, young men and women, you know, coming up to him and asking for autograph and posing for pictures and everything, it's just amazing.
What are the transportation issues involved in getting a product that is liquid, requiring it to be in a sealed bottle, and you know, to locations around the world?
Well, we tend to ship most of our bulk bourbon in containers. Like I said, you know, we won't ship them in barrels that far away. They'll be dumped and put into tanker trucks and things like that, and then they'll be bottled, you know, around the world. But you know, in Kentucky, we really haven't had a problem. You know, Kentucky is perfectly situated on major highways and within a 6 hours drive of most of, you know, the U.S. population. So we've been very fortunate in getting our products out. I think the issue that we've got going on with, which I think a lot of America's got going on, the smaller craft distillers these days, we're trying to help them find more places to distribute their products because they don't have the budgets of a Brown-Forman, you know, or a Jim Beam. So that's been an issue, but at the same time, they're making as fast as they can sell it, you know. So as they grow, we'll help them grow and find more distribution channels.
Is moving it by mail or by common carriers, is that still controversial?
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's one thing that we'd love to do. We get a lot of complaints that's probably the only complaint we get at distilleries from our Kentucky Bourbon Trail visitors, because 90% of them are from out of state. And they come to Kentucky and they want to buy a few bottles and ship them back home. And it's just not something that we can do yet. I think it might be coming in the future. And it's hard, you know, we can't carry it on airplanes either. So you have to check in your baggage and things. But that's something we're looking at. You know, we've always been in contact with UPS and other carriers to see if trends change. We'd like to be at the forefront of that. All
right. Well, we want to find out if there are other obstacles, other goals that your association has. And we'll be back in just a moment with Eric Gregory as we talk about Kentucky bourbon, celebrating some big numbers, a big part of Kentucky's economy and growing. Back with that, and we'll be looking at our bluegrass poll in the U.S. Senate coming up a little later on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers.
He's respected. Our state senator, Jared Carpenter. He's a tested leader fighting for Kentucky, our home. He brings pride and hard work to the job of state senator. Jared Carpenter never wavers on his commitment to Kentucky and protecting our way of life. On November 4th, let's stand with Jared Carpenter for better paying jobs, a growing, vibrant economy, and a brighter future that keeps Kentucky moving in the right direction.
2008.
Traders freaked out to see how low the Dow will go.
Life savings wiped out, but not everyone's. Mitch McConnell had private calls with the Treasury Secretary, then rearranged his portfolio. An unfair advantage. What about your retirement? McConnell voted to privatize Social Security, gamble trust fund money in the stock market. 40% of it could have been lost in the crash. What good is clout if McConnell sells us out? Senate Majority PAC is responsible for the content of this ad.
Welcome back now to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Enjoying catching up with Eric Gregory and learning about Kentucky's growing bourbon industry. He's a wealth of knowledge in talking about what's going on, and really with the fact that this is now a $3 billion part of Kentucky's economy. That's a big player.
Wow, that is. I mean, in $3 billion in just 2 years, you know, so we've almost doubled that number. From the time it takes to make a good straight bourbon whiskey, 2 years, we've doubled the workforce. We've tripled the number of distilleries. You know, we've grown to a $3 billion industry in Kentucky. Tax revenue provided by the distilleries has jumped from 120-something million to almost $170 million. We think we're a good investment, and that's, I think, they're one of the reasons why the legislature this past year passed the bourbon barrel reinvestment tax credit to help us deal with the barrel tax. That is something that only Kentucky charges.
You have indicated that you would like for the industry to be able to purchase more of its raw products from Kentucky, grains, other things. How do you push that along?
Well, you know, it's something that our distilleries, some of our distilleries have had the same grain contracts for 70 years. You know, so it's an issue of quality and price, you know, for them. But you know, working with the Corn Growers Association, the Governor's Office, and the new distilleries that are coming. You know, more and more of the new distilleries that are locating here are obviously using locally sourced grains. So it's mainly just kind of creating that network and continue the discussion, and hopefully that we can, you know, come to some agreements, and even cattle. You know, that's something that's a big beneficiary of our industry. We produce a lot of spent grains that go to feed cattle. I think they said that we produce enough every year to feed 90,000 head of cattle in Kentucky. So it's kind of the circle of life, and the more we can do to, you know, not only help our distilleries source more local grains, but then they often give away that spent grain to local farmers to help feed livestock. You know, it's great for everybody.
Where do the bottles come from?
Well, that's a place that we could really use some help. Now, the new glass industry has opened down in E-Town in the past year, because that's something that I know Secretary Larry Hayes and the Economic Development Cabinet and I have both been scratching our head on for years, that a glass manufacturer is not located in Kentucky, because you've got a captive audience here, you know, almost. So we have one coming now, and you know, they're usually all from just right around this neck of the woods, but we don't have anybody in Kentucky until this year. We've got barrel cooperages here, you know, that make all the barrels. But the bottle companies have not been as quick to react.
By pushing this idea of bourbon tourism, Kentucky has really benefited from that. And you have said that Kentucky towns are being transformed in some ways when they have these distilleries that people want to come see as an attraction. It's
amazing. When we first started promoting the Kentucky Bourbon Trail 15 years ago, I think the distilleries will be among the first people to tell you they didn't know what we had. And it took a few years to really kind of catch on, but now it is probably one of the fastest growing tourism attractions in this region. You know, nearly 700,000 people now visiting a distillery every year, and 90% of them are from outside Kentucky. And you come to Kentucky and you discover the distilleries, and then you find all the other great things to do here. You know, we've got incredible restaurants that are cooking with bourbon. We've got you know, great historic places to visit around our distilling communities. And in our communities, you know, they're very historic, they're very charming, they're very unique. You've got horse country right here. You've got Keeneland and Churchill Downs. You know, once we get them here, I think they realize what a gem Kentucky really is.
Any major business has a legislative agenda, and certainly with yours, a highly regulated industry,
yes.
And a large and growing industry, certainly has to want to bend the ear of lawmakers. What kind of agenda will you have for the upcoming session?
Well, we're very thankful again of the passage of the bourbon barrel tax. That was something that's been decades in the making, and they passed that this session, and also a reduction in the license fee for craft distilleries to help us better compete, you know, nationally to attract those new distilleries to Kentucky. I think we're going to be looking more solely at tourism reform. We've looked at other states and other places like California's wine country and some of the things that they're allowed to do there. We've got all these people coming.
Such as?
They can have restaurants on site. They can sell mixed drinks. They can, you know, right now we're limited to 3 bottles per distillery. That's something that people come from outside Kentucky just don't understand. If I want to go to Woodford Reserve and get a beautiful etched bottle with my name on it, or, you know, a couple from my buddies for their Christmas presents, why can't I get more than 3? You know, so we're going to
What is the reason for that law? Do you know?
It was actually made before the Bourbon Trail was even created, and I think it was something that, just like many of our other alcohol laws, is just kind of outdated and needs to be modernized. I don't think back in the early 90s when the legislature passed that, they would ever dream that the Kentucky Bourbon Trail would become the tourist attraction that it is today. So we've been getting some really good support from the legislators that we talked to so far. As long as we don't talk about taxes and things like that, you know, the money issues, I think they're happy to help us.
Colleges always like to get their students jobs, and if this is a growing sector of Kentucky's population, do you think our educational institutions are ready at this point to help get students trained for jobs in the bourbon industry?
Yes. In fact, University of Kentucky is working with us right now on a new agriculture program to help train people for distilling. And I just found out the other day that they've got a bourbon tourism class. I would have taken that in a heartbeat when I was at UK. And our friends in Louisville at the Distilled Spirits Epicenter has got a great relationship with the Jefferson County Community Technical College system there, and they're putting together a curriculum as well that's already been endorsed by our master distillers to train this next generation, because with the tremendous growth, I mean, the next 5 years, we're looking at investing another $630 million in distilleries. That's warehouses and production and everything, and we're going to need more workers. And you know, these are great paying jobs. The average salary is a whopping $91,000 for a distillery employee in Kentucky. So we really wanted to, you know, kind of raise our own and train our own.
Eric, we know that Kentucky's had its heyday for tobacco and as a coal producer. Do you foresee any kind of a life cycle, a peaking of the demand for bourbon, or is this a phenomenon that can continue to grow?
Well, I hope not, knock on wood, because we are riding a wave right now that we haven't seen in generations. You know, I don't think the distilleries, and they've got people there who are a lot smarter than me making decisions on forecasting and predicted growth. And I don't think they'd be investing the hundreds of millions of dollars that they are unless they thought this was a legitimate trend. And, you know, so I believe it is truly a phenomenon that will last for a great while, because we're opening up new markets. We've got new consumers coming in every day, and, you know, it's great for Kentucky. So you know, I've got my fingers crossed, but I think it really is something that's going to have a long shelf life.
Do some of those craft distillers have the idea of maybe becoming major players at some point?
Why not?
Is that why you get in to start with?
Of course. I mean, who doesn't want to be the next Maker's Mark? You know, I mean, and that's something else that we always look around to see what other states are doing to attract new distillers and what we can be doing to remain more competitive. Because let's say one day in Portland or Texas, one of these new craft distillers becomes the next Maker's Mark or Woodford Reserve, and suddenly Kentucky's historic monopoly on bourbon from 95% slips to 80% or even worse, 75%. We can't afford to let that happen because it is a job creator. We're an economic driver for the Commonwealth, and something we can truly share with the world and say this is uniquely Kentucky. So that's why we're trying to be as competitive as possible.
A lot of people, I'm sure, envy your job, huh?
I have the greatest job in the world. I cannot complain. I never dreamed we'd be in this position or having this much success.
We were young reporters together.
Yes.
You were at the Herald Leader back
a long time
in the day.
ago.
Eric Gregory, thank you for coming.
Thank you,
We
Bill.
appreciate it very much.
Sir.